After seeing all of the musical talent and artistic talent, I feel like my presentation is inadequate after seeing the talent of our students. They are very talented. My project is called Digital Reader Library, and it's a sort of an experiment on how digital readers can change the classroom, how they can change our school. And the project sort of came out of a number of different concerns. One of those concerns is, and I'm sure that many of you other teachers have seen the same thing, textbook prices remain high, and budgets continually are going down. And when you get that grouping, high textbook prices, low budgets, what we end up dealing with is old textbooks, out-of-date textbooks, information that is not as up-to-date as it should be. We also see, just like we saw with the art, that we're in a digital age and things change with technology. And one of the things we see at our schools are sometimes our schools, because of budgets, are slow to keep up with that digital transition. And if you're like me, I do a lot of my reading on a digital device. I've always been a reader. I still like to read a regular book, but it's just easier. It's more cost-effective to read on a digital device. And our young people are growing up with digital devices. That is what they know. That is how they understand the world. And they, too, are reading on those digital devices. And our schools have not kept up with that trend. Our schools have not created access to all of our students where they can keep up with the trend of digital devices. And if you're like me, you create a lot of your own content, especially when we get to those areas where our textbooks, other resources just aren't there. They're not up to date. So we've got to create our own content. And the problem with that is, how do we get that content we create to the student? And the main way to do it is paper copies, right? You create something, you run off copy after copy after copy. And we notice these concerns just by you take an inventory at the end of the school year. You know what technology you have. You know what textbooks you have. You can look around your classroom and see the condition of the resources that you have. You can look in your libraries and see whether digital readers are there. It doesn't take a lot to see that there is a problem. And then you look at that paper usage that comes off the copy machine. Those numbers just get bigger and bigger, and that turns into a lot of money. This is sort of the state of many of our schools. Old textbooks, lots of copies. And that's the problem we're faced with. So this project was intended to try to address that problem. Is there a way that digital readers can fix this? Is there a way that digital readers can change the game, that they can allow us to combat these issues? So that is what our project is focusing on, creating a library of digital readers. And the purpose was not to replace what we already have, right? The purpose of creating this library is not to replace the books in the library, not to phase them out and replace them with something new and shiny, but to be there along with them, to accompany them, to give a resource that we don't have in our schools. So here are the expected outcomes. That students would have immediate and up-to-date access to relevant content in the classroom. That they're able to be active participants in this growing trend of reading on digital devices. We have so many kids, that's what they read on. But we have kids who don't have the means to buy a digital device. They don't have the economic ability to have their own device. And what happens when they go to school, the school as well is not meeting that need. It's not allowing some of our students to keep up with other students on these growing trends. And really, the big one for teachers is, how can we as a staff easily and cost efficiently self-publish our work? How can we get the resources we're creating in our classroom to the students without having those huge piles of paper resources that we see? So this is what our current project is. We went with the Kindle Fire 7-inch just because it really is the most cost effective. So with our $1,000, we were able to purchase 24 Kindle Fires. And when you start to look at other sort of digital media devices, I mean, iPads and different things, you start to run into the hundreds. So the Kindle Fire was the most cost efficient. We also were able to get 3 docking stations because you've got to figure out how are we going to keep these things charged? How are we going to make sure that every day in the classroom they'll be ready for the next day and the next day? We were able to purchase these through a Prime deal. I think they were about $35 a piece. So that sort of shows you the cost efficiency of the Kindle. Now I think they're regularly $50, but Amazon is always putting them on sale. I looked last night, and they're running a Prime deal right now, $34.99. So with $1,000, you can almost create a whole classroom set where if you're going with other devices like an iPad, you're talking about just singular digits there. So this we thought was best for what we were trying to accomplish. So how does it work? How do we use this digital reader library? What do we use it for? Well, you can use it for pretty much anything. You can use it to give a test. If you're like me, you have big tests, you go and you have to make those paper copies of all your tests. Well, what you do now, you send it to your digital library. The kids access it on the Kindle. You don't have to do all those paper copies. They can still fill in Scantrons and whatever that you use to, however you grade, and you sort of cut out all that paper, right? We use it for, I teach an American Studies class where we look at U.S. history through sports. We use things like the Olympics to talk about the Cold War, Muhammad Ali to talk about resistance to the Vietnam War. Well, there's not a textbook for that. We don't have a textbook for that in our classroom. So you've got to create the textbook. And that is probably what this is best at, because there are lots of resources online. But how do you get them to the students? Do you print off every article? Do you print off every story? It turns into page after page after page. Well, if you can get all of these things in the hands of a student without those copies, it becomes very cost efficient. PowerPoints. Sometimes you have students who may have difficulty seeing the PowerPoint. Their eyesight puts them at a disadvantage. Maybe you have students who can't take notes as quickly as other students. Well, what happens is you can send the PowerPoint to the Kindle Fire and the student can follow along with the slides right there in front of them. It gives them an extra advantage. So there's all kinds of different ways to use this. So how do you add content to it? It's extremely easy. Every Kindle Fire has its own individual email address. You can see I've got a number 7 on the back of this. That is because this is McGoffin7@kindle.com. And all you have to do is take all of your individual email addresses, you put them into one group email, and whenever I have a document, I just go get on my email, attach it, send it out to all the Kindles at once. PowerPoint, you can send them out to all the Kindles at once. If you create a grouping, you can send it to individual Kindles. They come in 4 different colors: red, blue, yellow, and black. So what happens is if you're giving a test and you're using it for a test and you've got different versions of the test, I've got a file that says my yellow Kindles. I can send test version A to my yellow Kindles, test version B to my blue Kindles. And that way when you distribute them, it's very easy to make sure you're not putting the same tests, exams next to each other. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use it. And literally, I can sit at my computer, send something off to all the Kindles. Within 15 seconds, every student who's got the Kindle, it pops right in there. Because whatever you send, PDFs, those files, when you send them to that address, they go automatically to the Kindle. The Kindle downloads them. Now, how do we keep students from accessing or downloading undesirable content? They're taking this test. Can't they just get online, figure out the answer that way? You have complete control using parental. You can pretty much shut down them accessing anything. My Kindles, they can't get on the web just right off. They can't Wi-Fi. They can't change passwords, settings. They can't go to games and apps. They can't. You can shut all of that down so when they open it up, they can only access the content you want them to access. So again, you can open it up and allow them to watch videos, to watch different things, but you can also shut all of that down. And also, unless your email address is on the approved list, the students can't send things to the Kindles themselves. So they can be used in a lot of different ways. And they're extremely sustainable because this content can be updated all the time. It's not like a textbook that's going to go out of date because you can continually create new content. And they're pretty cost effective for what they're able to do. So our final analysis at the end of the day, students do have immediate and updated access to resources. I can easily self-publish to my students. The one thing we're still trying to figure out, how do we go about putting these in the hands of students for recreational reading? Do we allow them to check them out of the library? That's something we're still working on. That's a part of the plan we're still trying to address. But overall, it has been a very productive project that's really helped out in the classroom. Comments or questions? Thank you. Got a question?
You know, for an old person like me, I'm basically hostile to reading on it.
Sure. I was that way too when I started.
Students, I assume, a lot like my grandchildren or even
Right.
children, they're not hostile.
Right.
So where is that headed? I mean, you're watching students and you're looking at how comfortable they are or what they prefer,
Right.
the way they prefer to read. Where is that headed?
I think you still have students who prefer a good physical book, right? I mean, you can tell a reader because they bring the physical books in. To me, the biggest advantage is for those students who aren't readers. How do we use this content that they're used to? Because they're used to playing on apps on their phones and they're used to doing these things. Can we somehow take that technology, what they're used to, and turn them into readers? To me, that's the big advantage is can we somehow, because they're used to this technology, turn a non-reader into a reader because they can access it on something they're comfortable with. But you're always going to, I think, have those students that they're readers and they're going to read whatever they can get their hands on, whether it's digital or whether it's a hard copy. So I don't think hardback books are going away, but I think they will eventually go away in the classroom. They're just not cost efficient enough in the classroom to remain, I think. Any other questions?
I did have one more
Okay.
question. I understand you to be saying that the available content online, much less printed books, is not keeping, it doesn't keep up with development.
Well, I think online, I mean, you've got,
It would produce a lot of material.
right, well, even online, how do we get the kids online? I mean, online, you're producing something every day. I mean, there's thousands of new pieces of information. Online is keeping up with the movement forward. How do we make sure our kids have access to those things online? And for example, like in my classroom, how do I create a textbook on a class that doesn't have a textbook? Well, I do use a lot of online resources. I do create a lot of things using what other people have created, but then how do I get that into the hands of the students? So I think online moves much quicker than through print. So how do we make sure the students are shifting in that direction, that they get that up-to-date information? I don't know if I answered that question, but
You did, but I just have one more question.
Okay.
And then I'll shut up.
that's what.
How do you teach them to differentiate between reliable sources and WikiLeaks?
Oh, that's a good question. And here's how I have been using this project. They're not going online with the Kindles and finding their own content. I'm creating the content. I'm sort of differentiating the reliability of it. And then what I'm doing is I'm self-publishing it as the teacher to them. So they know it's reliable because it's coming from me. And I mean, if it's not reliable coming from me, I probably shouldn't be teaching it. But I think it is important that we do teach our children how to differentiate, how to make sure that their sources are good. But in this setting, I'm the one that's creating the content or finding the sources to give them. they're not going and accessing it themselves. Thank you, guys.